A reminder, Ashley. Okay, so we are now recording candidate edition, knowing your competition. Okay, so knowing the competition allows you to do a lot of different things here, but I think one of the more important aspects is it's going to build your confidence for every placement. Now, sometimes that's building your confidence towards saying, I'm going to be placing this doctor. Other times, it might be going in the other direction, right? That's okay. We all know that that other direction is frankly where it ends up the majority of the time. So the sooner that you can identify what's going on, how strong the options are versus the options that a candidate has through their own efforts, the more confident you're going to be going one way or another here. And you're going to be able to determine the appropriate amount of activity, time, energy that should go in to this type of activities, trying to really get dialed in on the potential for closing. Okay, so where are you going to start with this process? It really starts from the very first conversation that you're going to have with a candidate. You want to try to get kind of a baseline, a benchmark for where they are in the process. That way, you know how much time you have to produce results. You know what they're favoring, what they're not. So this is a great way for you to kind of build some rapport with the candidate as well, because you're learning about what their motivations are. So, typically we probably all have a way of saying this, but for me, I'm just pretty direct about it and get in there and say, kind of where am I getting involved in your process? Did you just start? Have you talked to a bunch of employers? You've gone on a ton of interviews, you've got offers in hand. Kind of give me a sense of where I'm getting involved here. And so I ask this kind of open-ended question because I want to get them talking. I want them to kind of explain what's going on, where they've been looking, what they've been looking for, okay? And I think this is a point where you really want to try to get into specifics, right? They'll say, oh, well, I've interviewed at a couple of places. I've got an offer or two. Start asking them about those things. Okay, so, where were those interviews? How did you feel they went? What were some of the positives there? And you sounds like you've got a couple of offers. How recently did you get those? If it's been a while since they've had those offers, you're probably going to want to ask about why they have not accepted any of those offers yet. Right? That's going to give you valuable information to better understand what type of a job you've got to provide to them, so they're going to get excited about it. Now, sometimes, I know we've all experienced this, you're asking some of these specific questions, the doctor might get a little guarded, like, well, I don't want to tell you the name of the employer or maybe the exact location, right? For whatever reason. And I think that's okay. I don't think you need to push too hard, especially in this initial conversation, because right now you're just trying to kind of get take some broad strokes here and get a good understanding of where you're at. Okay, I do think it's a good strategy to, if there maybe is some reluctance there, even if there's not, to let them know. Part of the reason I'm asking about this is because I want to know, number one, kind of what opportunities are attractive to you and why, which ones are not and why, but also part of my efforts for you is going to be looking to identify new jobs with employers that we have existing relationships with, and sometimes ones that we don't. And so if they're employers you've talked to, I want to make sure I avoid reaching out to them on your behalf, right? There's no sense for me to get involved here as a third party, right? So I just don't want to duplicate any efforts you've made. I don't want to be redundant with my actions, kind of however you want to say that. But I think that's a good way of kind of justifying why you're asking for this information versus them thinking, oh, well, maybe they're going to try to get in my way here. I mean, I'm not really sure what they would think, but everybody's got some ideas there. Okay. Um, but I think really what you want to keep your focus on in this initial interview is, how many options do they have in hand now? That includes phone calls, site visits, contracts, runs the gamut. Okay. You want to get a sense of who they're talking to and where they are in that process. Um, how attractive are those options? Is there a job that they're like, this one's really good, it's going to be tough to beat? Have they interviewed a few places, they're just not that excited about it, and that's why they're continuing to look? So you really want to try to get more information from them about why they're liking that, why they're not. And then trying to identify, is there a deadline? Right? Do they maybe have an offer in hand where if you aren't able to produce options for them quickly enough, they're just going to be forced to take that other job? Right. I think that's a really important one when you understand they're farther along in the process. If you don't ask that, you might start rolling, and then 3, 4 days later, they're like, hey, I just took another job. And you feel like you wasted a whole bunch of your time. Now, I'm not saying you wouldn't necessarily take the actions, but again, good to know. So you've got clear expectations about where things are going. Okay. Um, Again, asking if if they've got offers and they haven't accepted them, why haven't they accepted them? This is really, really important to ask them this question. You want to know how you can fix that problem. Okay. And then finally, I like to ask, when do they want to have a signed contract by? When do they want their process to end and have this job search wrapped up? That's going to help me to understand how quickly I need to move. And I can use, that what you'll find as we continue going through this is you're really going to be leveraging the timing for all of these things throughout the whole process. Okay. So your candidates set an interview, right? We've done our initial call. We've kind of gotten that baseline, right? You're going to run through your checks again. A lot of the same stuff's going to happen again, right? Because you can't assume that what happened 2-3 weeks ago, they're still in the exact same position. Maybe a colleague reached out, hey, my practice is finally hiring, we get to work together. A job fell in their lap. Who knows, right? Maybe a significant other got a job or something like that now is pulling them in a different direction, right? So you want to be able to understand, has anything changed from that initial conversation to now when they've set this interview? Because once they've set the interview, right, they're on the clock, right? And the more interviews that they have set, the deeper that we can get into TKD territory, right? This is really where the timing starts to play a very crucial part in the process and you creating leverage and justification for taking action. Okay, so a lot of common obstacles here. These things we've all heard, we've all seen them, right? Other interviews that the doc's got to go on. I think that's one of the number ones, right? Like, hey, are you going to be prepared to make a decision? Well, I've got other site visits I need to go on. When are those happening? Where are those happening? Let's talk about it, okay? I know I said I'm not really getting into the client side, but this is also really important here. I just wanted to mention, make sure you're asking the client how many other interviews they have. When are they going to be prepared to make a decision? That's going to help create leverage for you, right? If you find out that they maybe don't have any other interviews set, well, hey, you can go in there, knock their socks off, secure the job. If they do have other things coming down the line for them in terms of other interested candidates, then you've really got to push your physician to say, hey, I really like what I see. I want the job, right? Waiting on an offer. We all get this one, right? Well, if they send me an offer, that's great, but I've got a couple other options I'm still kind of waiting to see and review, and I'm not going to be prepared to make a decision until then, right? And then reviewing negotiation of an offer. These things all take time, right? I think some of us have been really fortunate where a doc gets a contract and seemingly signs it right away with little to maybe no review. That's great, right? But that's not what usually happens. At times, it can be a very drawn out process. Attorneys are getting involved, all this stuff. Me personally, I don't want to get too far off track here, but one of one of the things that I get worried about is when I've got a doctor's attorney negotiating for them, whether they're calling me, they're calling the client. I don't like that. It feels impersonal, and I don't think it gives people those warm fuzzies. All right. But again, we're really asking about all these things here because we're going back to the timing element of this, right? If they interview for job A and they tell you they've got job B that they want to interview at a month later, that could very well be a big problem, right? Is the employer going to wait a month for them to make a decision? And then when they go on that interview, is it going to be 2 more weeks to get a contract? Does the employer have other interviews now? So it could very easily be, it might seem like, oh, well, I'm going to interview here in 30 days and then I'll make a decision. But let's say the employer has 3 more interviews. Now it's 60 days. So this timing element here, really you can use to your advantage and leverage it. Okay. We know that employers don't like to wait. The longer they wait, they're going to feel like they're not the first choice, right? And that's what we're trying to protect. We're trying to make sure that even if they're not the first choice, they're feeling like they are. Right? A delay really pushes the client to move forward with other candidates who are more decisive. And those of you that have worked with me closely, I'm certain have probably heard me say these words, but it's not always the candidate, it's the best match that gets the job. It can be the one that is the most decisive. And that's when I say, Doc, this is your opportunity to be both of those things. The best candidate for the opportunity and the most decisive. If you like what you see and hear on the interview, let them know that you want to move forward, right? It's not you saying, hey, send me a contract so I can sign it immediately, unless you feel that way. But it is making your intentions clear. You don't want a candidate to be ambiguous because, again, it's sometimes the most decisive one that ends up getting the job. Okay. Um, Again, little bit of client stuff here where you also need to know the client's timetable, right? I alluded to that earlier. That's just a really important element because that's something that's going to allow you to help manage expectations for the candidate and can convince them to move forward maybe with another job, right? Consider a scenario where you've got them interviewing at your job and they have another opportunity that they've already interviewed at, but you learn about the other job B, and they've got 4 or 5 more interviews to go on. Now, is your job going to wait that long? Probably not, right? So again, creating leverage here. It's also really, really important. I hope everybody's asking this question once you've got an interview set with a candidate. If this employer puts a good offer in your hands, is there anything that would prevent you from being able to accept? I just leave it real open-ended because that can really be any number of things. It could be some of the timing obstacles we've talked about. It could be something that's unrelated to them personally. Maybe a significant other or family member has some sort of sway in this. Who knows what's going on, right? But you want to get a sense of what they say about that. And that's going to tell you a lot about how interested they are in that particular job. If they say, oh, I don't know, well, you probably don't know very well either. Okay. So moving on, kind of final stage here, okay? Your candidate has completed the interview. Now what? Now what do we do? Are we still evaluating competition? Of course, right? We're going to go through those same checks again. What other options are still on the table? Any timing obstacles here? Other interviews to still go on, right? We want to start getting them to rank the positions in terms of what their preference is and why is it that preference, okay? And then if they're mentioning concerns about jobs, things like that, we need to know, are those deal breakers, right? How serious is that issue for them? Is it not that serious? Is it a walk away? Is it just a nice to have? These are all things that you want to be able to go over to identify, again, where your job stacks up against any other options that might be out there for the candidate, okay? But I really feel like if you consistently do this at kind of all 3 of these stages, you're going to have a really good understanding of which jobs they prefer, which ones they don't. You're going to know where your job is ranking. And again, this goes back to what I said right at the beginning, which is that we want to be able to build a level of confidence in either likely acceptance or likely rejection. Okay. But a really important element here, and I know I've talked about it again, is this: the more interviews they schedule, the harder it's going to be for them to protect the job that they interviewed at first or second, right? So at some point, you want to be talking to the candidate and asking them something along the lines of, how aggressive do you want me to continue to be in identifying new opportunities for you? Do you feel like you've got enough on the table right now where you're going to be able to make something work? These are good options. If they say, oh yeah, I think I'll be good, then okay, you're still going to keep your eyes out for things. You don't want to get blindsided. But they might say the opposite, which is, oh no, I'm not really confident about any of these. Yeah, keep sending me jobs. You see anything good? And you're like, that's not what I was hoping to hear, right? But now you know. Now you know. All right. So I think, again, following these steps, a lot of this is about timing. A lot of it is somewhat redundant, but this is because you can't make many assumptions when it comes to this type of stuff. Okay. So I wanted to this I didn't think it was going to be a super long roundtable, but I also thought it probably would take a little bit longer. I don't know if I just kind of talked fast here, but part of what I did want to build into this is if anybody has any kind of competition scenarios right now, maybe we can throw some of those out. We can strategize about them. If anybody has any, stories of where there was competition, how you negotiated that, how you went through the process, how it worked out for you, I'd love to hear it. So if we've got anybody that can contribute in any way, please jump in.
I don't particularly have any, scenarios, but I did have a question if now's a good time for that too.
Sure. Questions
Okay.
are great. Let's
Um,
roll.
so I found that times that I'm able to give some sort of instruction up front when I'm first talking to a candidate about certain parts of our interaction, that it usually, not always, but it usually puts us in a better place in terms of communication. Does anyone have any kind of rules they set for themselves slash the candidates when they're talking to them, or any like go-to sayings you even give them of like, hey, I'm going to reach out to you when X, Y, and Z happens. And my expectation is that I hear back from you within X amount of time. If not, we'll just consider that you're not that serious and we'll move on. Does anyone give any sort of instruction about that up front before, we've even heard back from anyone? Does anyone have any kind of rules they follow that they found are helpful in that way?
I mean, I'll jump in. I'm sure some other people might have some input on this too, Ashley, but definitely I think you want to try to set very clear expectations for what you need in order to be successful to help them. And part of that's going to be prompt communication. And so I think, we talk about TKD, we talk about takeaways a lot. That's kind of where we're going here. Like, hey, if I reach out once or twice and I don't hear back from you, I'm just assuming you're not that interested in this job, and I'll let them know to move on to other candidates. I know takeaways sometimes can be a little anxiety producing because you want to give kind of a seed a chance to grow. But the more slack you give somebody, it's kind of, you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile, right? So I
Right.
think the quicker that you can get to that, setting very clear expectations about what you need to be successful for them, that's always the best thing to do, especially early on, because then you're going to get a sense of, are they willing to do that? Do they seem like they don't really want to have to keep you in the loop? And that's going to allow you to kind of adjust your expectations accordingly.
I have a question or some thoughts. What about when it just comes I have a candidate right now who interviewed two places, liked them both. One of them's
Mhm.
got a little bit more ideal location, and they have given her verbally what the LOI is going to be in terms of money. So it comes down
Okay.
to two places. I've, got her to say that if our client, the place we had an interview, as a higher offer, she would consider it. So
Okay.
what about when it just comes down to just money? And, I'm not sure if our client will, up the offer, they make
Right.
it, and how do you
Yeah.
move
That's
towards that?
It's a really good question, John, and that's something that I think we all find ourselves in this position frequently, right? Money is not always the motivating factor, but it's always a factor.
Mhm.
And certainly when you know that that's the factor it's coming down to, we have to address it. And so my opinion here, John, is that if you want to be able to go to the client, and with you need the candidate to agree to this, you want to be able to go to the client and say, if you offer
Mhm.
doctor this, they are going to take the job. They intend to accept. Okay. But the employer needs to know that. Otherwise, they could be hesitant to provide that increase. There could be other reasons why, but they could be hesitant to provide that increase because they feel maybe they're using this as leverage to get a better offer somewhere else, right? So I
Mhm.
think it's important that justification is clear, that the employer knows what they're going to get if the increase is made. And so that's really what I would suggest, is going back to the candidate and saying, so I have permission to go tell them that if they increase the offer to this amount, you're going to take the job. At the same time, you need to ask the candidate very clearly, so if they do not increase the offer, does that mean you're walking away? So that's how I would approach that specific situation, John, is get the buy-in from the candidate, get them to agree to move forward and take the job if they're offered whatever they need.
Mhm. Okay.
Good question. Yep. Tom?
I have a scenario that I can share, a couple scenarios. One, I'm working with a physician in Philadelphia, building rapport with her, trying to understand the lay of the land and such. And she was actually very forthcoming with where she was interviewing. So as soon as I get that little snippet, I'll kind of lean into that, playing off of anything else the candidate shares. So they were able to share 3 places they were interviewing. 2 of the jobs we had, 1 we didn't. So I can then research that company, or at least have an understanding of everywhere she is interviewing throughout to help manage kind of through the candidate through the process. The other scenario, one of the placements I put through this week, Marina Machado at UPMC. So she took the job with Erie in the end. However, her location parameters, she wanted to be nearer her partner in Columbus or family in Cleveland. And through the process there, essentially, it was just keeping tabs as many points as you can, especially at the beginning, to get as much information from the candidate up front before they have any power or any control. Because when you don't have anything for them, they need you versus you need them. So kind of through that, I was able to pick apart, what was really important for her personally outside of location parameters, which was not burnout, if there are any 10-hour hospitalist shifts versus 12 hours and such. So kind of when push came to shove, I was able to essentially just reiterate all of her language she told me. This wasn't really very new. I was just collating it all and putting it back into her brain of everything she told me at the beginning of the process, which kind of helps remove a lot of clouded judgment I've found and kind of reacclimate to the opportunity. And then kind of Ashley, on your point, kind of tactics, I just really like to use the candidate's language back to them for like setting expectations. I'll ask them questions, I'll understand everything. And then when it's kind of at the end of a call or the end of a process, it's, okay, right, you've shared this, 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 and this with me. I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to, search for opportunities, yada, yada, yada. And then I will essentially agree with them and get them to tell me it, kind of, speak it back to me into the ether. So that seems to work well when you have a candidate that actually engages that way.
Yeah, good points, Tom. Another thing I'll mention here that that I didn't talk about earlier, but something you said, Tom, reminded me about it. When you are able to identify, if they give you names of employers where they're interviewing, right? Guess what you can do with that information? You can go get that job. Maybe it's a job we already have. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Maybe that's your foothold or your door opener to get a new client and get a new job opportunity. So that's an additional benefit that can come by asking these detailed questions.
I was going to add a tip here, Ian. If you just assume when you're talking to them that they have other jobs that they're looking at, and you talk to them and just acknowledge, hey, I know you've got other opportunities. You take the mystery out of it from the candidate. It lowers their defenses. I know you're looking at other people. You know you're looking at other people. So let's just talk about what we can do to make sure that, I'm presenting you the best offers possible. It lowers their resistance. Now the secrets, not that it was ever a secret, but they kind of sometimes hold back. But if you just approach it from as, I'm just going into this knowing that you're talking to other people. So tell me what you're hearing, what you're seeing. You'll see that they open up to you much faster.
Really good point, Dave. Be a lot of apprehension and anxiety to share that stuff. So I think just making it easy for them to say those things to you, so they're not worried that you're gonna feel any sort of way about the competition. Go ahead, Evan. Sorry.
Yeah, no, kind of in line with that, Dave. One thing that I have run into a lot more this year is, getting a lot of response on the front end as far as people interviewing, where they're interviewing. They're very general in their locations and trying to dig in, but more so the late stage of the process. Once a candidate has an offer in hand, I've run this to this a few times this year where I go to them and say, hey, well, where does this position rank? If they've just done a site visit, they get the offer, where does this rank in comparison to the other offers? Is it one that you're motivated to move forward with in comparison to those? I have gotten a lot of pushback this year as far as skepticism of really discussing that. Oh, well, I'm kind of looking at all these offers right now and still reviewing several of them to kind of see which are going to best fit by these very general, kind of fluff to get through the question without really answering it. And I just want to see kind of word track wise what you use sometimes for pushback on that, because that is one thing that, I've tried a handful of different things to try and get more info as far as where we really rank, because traditionally in those situations, it is going to be because they don't want to tell you that they have another offer they like more or another site visit that they're more interested in. They'll usually give up if they have the site visit set up, but they won't be as forthcoming with necessarily where. And I have run into that a decent amount this year, and kind of the pushback to that, to take their guard down. It's almost like they don't want to lose out on the position that you've got them into and still want to have it as almost a backup option, but they also don't want to tell you about the one they're maybe really interested in.
That's a good question, Evan, and I think that's tricky. You know, some people are going to be willing to be more open than others. I think one of the strategies that I would suggest employing is making it less about your need to know and more about your client's need to understand their timetable, their expectations of what's going to make a good offer, right? And so if you get the sense that, you know, they've got another job that's not yours that they prefer, they won't really tell you much about it, right? You can say, well, you know, this employer's counting on me to come back to them and provide your feedback. You know, what do you like about this offer? How does it stack up against the others? Because they want to send you something that you're going to be really excited about. And so if I'm not able to share that with them, my concern is you're going to end up getting a contract that you might immediately feel like this isn't what I was expecting. This isn't what I want, right? And that's what I'm trying to prevent, is you having your time wasted. And frankly, having this employer's time wasted, because there's time, energy, resources in terms of pulling together this contract for you, sending it out. They've got to get their attorneys involved, right? So there's an expense and time here that if we're too far apart, I just want to make sure that we can you know, stop this process before we get too far ahead. So, you know, that's really what I'm trying to get at. If, you know, I don't need you to give me the name of the employer. You don't even have to give me the exact location, but I'd really like to be able to help advocate for you. And part of that is ensuring this employer knows what you need.
For sure. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say that same thing. Tell them, like, I sense you've got something you're not telling me. I don't care where it is. I don't care who it is. Just tell me what this offer has that my offer doesn't. You get and then you'd be surprised at how many times they start talking and all of a sudden they've told you where it is. So
Yeah,
just
for sure.
tell
I've had
me you
that
don't
happen on the
care.
flip
Like
side of
Ian
it. So,
said, it doesn't matter who it is or where it is. What's it got? How does it stack up with this one? And if you take that pressure off of them, then they'll end up telling you.
Yeah. And I mean, depending on the timing here and how critical it is that you get that information, I mean, you could be looking at some sort of a takeaway. You know, I think that it very easily could be like, you know, it just doesn't really seem like you're that interested in the job that we're talking about. It seems like you really prefer this other one. Should I just go ahead and tell them to pursue other candidates? Like, should we just cross this one off the list and just see how they react to that? You know, maybe because one of the important things here, everybody, is that if and this aligns with what Dave just said, if you don't believe them, that's a problem. They need to be able to convince you. You've got to get them to defend their position. And that's not you being a jerk about it, but it's you definitely asking the right questions to feel confident or not. And if you don't feel confident, call it out. Say the thing. A lot of times I've told people so frequently in this gig that when you're thinking about what you should say, stuff like that, that inner monologue, often that is exactly what you should say at that time to the candidate or the client, right? Those are the thoughts, you know, trust your gut in those situations, because that's very likely exactly what they need to hear at that point, because you're thinking, you're being truthful, right? You're not trying to sugarcoat anything in that inner monologue. Tom?
Just thought of something that I've kind of used, but not necessarily as intentionally as this. Hey, doc, you're my patient right now. I need you to explain to me your ailments or everything that's going on, the entire history. Like, give me what's going on, what you need, what hurts, you know, where you want to be, so on and so forth. And that kind of thing is hopefully will help them go, oh, okay, right. Try it. I'm going to try it. Just had a thought.
I like that, Tom.
Good analogy.
Evan, to your point too, one thing, if you're getting like pushback on like trying to get info on competition that you've got out there, one thing that I used to, in that very first call with the candidate, I present myself more as like a resource to them. And then I would lean on the history of Curari, of being in business for 34 years. We work with just about everybody out there. So if there's any insight, you know, I can answer questions about maybe if you're interviewing with a group that you're already connected with, I'm sure that I have some kind of insight that I can provide to you about that group, or we've crossed paths with them in the before, but hell, I might have even crossed paths with them before. I think if you present it like that as a kind of and make yourself a resource to them, it opens up the floodgates. Because like I think back to like whenever I'd speak with candidates, I had no issues getting what they were already involved in and getting them to tell me about that. And I think that that's where it started with in that first call of presenting yourself more as, hey, how can I get a job in front of you this way? But like, I'm here to help you across the entire board because of the history and how long we've been doing this. I think that that used to work pretty well.
For sure. Yeah, and I've had, I usually have had pretty good luck up front with them, giving up info. I'm, interviewing in these 3 places, and sometimes they'll be as specific as the actual site. A lot of times it's, more so once they get the offers in hand, and then it's like an almost a position of distrust to an extent of, oh, you're just, you're a recruiter, you're trying to push me into this job you've got me into. And like in my head, I'm like, yeah, damn right I am. But at the same time, it's like, presenting that in a way to where, they're going to lean towards, our opportunity versus maybe something that else that they have, without trying to make it, super pushy. But but I have had
Yeah, it's
some
a
luck
subtle
there. I mean,
sale.
Dr. Steele that I placed this week, that was the exact scenario. I mean, he was still holding out some originally on a position in Denver with HCA, and I was like, oh, when was the last time you spoke with them? And he said, oh, well, we had an initial call, and they said they would get back to me. That was about 5-6 weeks ago. I said, you haven't heard from them in 6 weeks? I said, the chances are that they're not going to call back. They have a million candidates there. I mean, that ended up being really effective with getting him across. And so I have had scenarios where it worked. I've just had several candidates this year that were more defensive, per se, as far as wanting to protect who they were interviewing, but also when going to them with a takeaway. I've had some luck on that, but a lot of times, it's like they don't want me to take it away because they want it as a backup option. And that's the point where, the back and forth has been, they'd like to be a bit ambiguous, if you will. So
yeah, I want to address something that you said here, Evan, about their expectation of you trying to push them into your job, right? Obviously, they know that if they take a job that we've sent them to, we're going to get paid. They all know that. We all know that, right? So what's the best way that you can combat that thought is to flat out tell them, Doc, it really doesn't matter to me if you take this job or that job. I want to help you find the right job. And if the one that I'm representing isn't the right opportunity, that's okay. Let's move on and find the one that you like. And if that doesn't happen to be a job that I'm representing, that's okay too. Right. And this kind of goes to what Dave Whitty was saying a little bit ago, is give them permission to tell you the stuff that they think you don't want to know. Right? If they feel you have too much of a vested interest in taking your specific job, that's when it is going to get secretive. And I realize this is easier said than done. In particular, if you don't have a lot of money board docs and things on your plate, you might be a little scared to push them in that way. But when you don't do that, you end up making decisions that otherwise you wouldn't make. And we've got to play in this game to win. We can't play not to lose. Right? So get in there. And again, I think one of the best strategies you can use in this gig with candidates is to act like you really couldn't even possibly care less what job they take. Your job is to provide them options. Their job is to do their due diligence and figure out which job they prefer. That's not up to you. And I'll tell them that.
for sure. And I have used that a great deal as well in terms of telling them, I just want you to find the best job that's going to be the best fit for you. I'd love for it to be this position that we discussed and you said you loved, and like Tom said earlier, use some of the words they gave to me. I said, but if it's something else, I understand. I'm just trying to help you get the best offer. So I have used that some. And like I said, it's just a varying level of ambiguity, but it's been a handful of candidates in comparison to the majority. So
yeah.
I just posted something on that, like the question, what's changed, is so powerful. Like if they're like, tell me what's changed. And if they say nothing, then it's like, well, something must have changed because you're not doing what you said you would, kind of thing. Humanizing.
Okay. Well, I don't know that I've got too much more. Anybody else have any questions? Anything they'd like to share before we wrap it up? No? Okay. Going once, going
I do.
twice. Sold.
Sorry.
Oh, all right. That's all right. That you came right in before
Uh,
the gavel. I almost just ended the meeting. Go ahead.
all right. That's me. So I just wanted to, and I think maybe this, I think most of us know this here, but I think posing questions in a way that would make them say no is always going to get you a better response and a more a meatier response than just saying something like your example earlier was, is there any reason why you wouldn't sign that contract? That's great versus, hey, would you sign it? Because if you ask, hey, would you sign it? They're usually going to be like, well, yeah, probably if da 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 da. So in any scenario, that CFA I'm working on, he's been kind of going back and forth with me for a while, and everything seems to line up, right? He didn't have any issues with the agreement, etc. So I finally just said, hey, is there any reason why you wouldn't be able to send this back to me signed today? And he responded to me. He was like, no reason. He was like, let me take a look at it again. Da 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 da. Cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus like, hey, So I just think it's such a simple thing. It's just a simple switch, but it has a really big impact.
It's called framing.
Yeah. I think that something that I was taught very early on in this job actually is exactly what you're saying here, which is you've got to try to seek out no's. Because when it's not a no, guess what it could be? A maybe or a yes, right? And so that's really what you're trying to do, is kind of set up these guardrails, these barriers, right? So where is the line for you here, right? You told me you wanted 350. Would you take, if they only offer you 340? Would that work? Or is that a no? What about 330? Right? 340 is maybe, 330 is like, probably not, right? But you keep asking those no's, and then that's where you're going to end up getting the answer that can be a yes. So that's definitely something you want to be doing all the time. Everybody trying to find those no's. Tom?
What's your opinion, Ian, on like when do you call it with a candidate? Like, when competition is such, or like a scenario from your experience, like what should we be looking for like tell signs, or like when do you just axe it, move on?
Sure. I think that's Jerry, you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, when they tell you they're not taking the job, like that's a really great time to cut bait. Like if they say to you, Tom, I'm not taking this job, there's no way you could put me into this job. If they're saying, Tom, this job really sucks, but you know what? It's like it's still on my list that I'm gonna keep as a job. The first one is dead, unless there's some way you could turn it around. But when somebody's literally telling you they're not taking the job and they have strong evidence backing it, whether it's like the interview stunk, the money stinks, whatever it is, that's dead in my opinion most of the time. Now, if there's a pulse, I'm going to try to sneak into where that pulse exists and make it beat a lot harder, But I'm going to do that in such a way where if I feel like I'm on the bottom 20% of their decision, then I'm going to try to get them to say no. I'm going to try to push them to that no. And if it's not a no, just like Ian said, I'm going to dive back in and try to make it a yes. And the way to make it a yes is going back to the client and enhancing the offer, giving time constraint decision making, sign-on bonus or something like that. Whatever it might be, you got to turn that 1% into 100%. It's like, I don't know if you guys are sports ball fans, but sometimes in these games they have these graphs that show that your percentage of winning, right? And it goes up and down throughout the game depending upon what the score is against each other. And that's kind of how these interviews go. Sometimes they come off of them and your percentage of winning is 2%. But then all of a sudden, like Eddie, who worked with Jim, the doctor that interviewed back in grade school at a hot dog stand, realizes that that Eddie works at the hospital. And they're like, oh my God, my childhood friend Eddie, now I've got a 54% chance. And your chances of winning go up for weird reasons, But until somebody tells you something's dead, it's alive in my opinion, and I don't cut bait. If I've got a doc that actually went to an interview that I set up, I'm going to do everything in my power to close that doc down or get them to say no. And until they tell me no, there's no cutting bait for me, Tom.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I don't know that I can give you like a this is other than, obviously I'm not taking the job. I don't know if I can give you one clear line. It's a great question, Tom. But to Jerry's point, I'm gonna provide two examples here. Okay. Jerry, you might remember a Dr. Kathleen Gill or Kathy Gill that I placed a very, very long time ago. And I placed her in a wound care job. Okay. And you know what she said to me? But after she interviewed, she goes, ugh, I hate wounds. And she still took the job. You guys, so did that seem dead? Sure did. Sure did.
Unbelievable.
Okay. And then another example here that just happened very recently, and this is just a point I want to make to everybody. Again, it's never dead until it's 6 feet under and totally dead. Okay. Nikki just made a placement this week, Dr. McFadden. The week before, McFadden signed another contract with Oak Street Health. He didn't want to have to do that. He did it because my client was dragging their feet. Okay. I got the surprise news that he'd signed this other contract. He'd already asked my client for a contract, didn't have it for about a week and a half, took this other job, right? That seems dead. He signed a contract, right? Nope. I have Nikki get a hold of the doc and I'm like, hey, if we can get Bob to send you an offer today, are you willing to sign it and tell Oak Street no? He said yes. So I get a hold of Bob, have to kind of rake him over the coals a little bit. He actually apologized to me several times, sent out a contract to him, made a couple of revisions that same day, sent it back out to him, and he signed it. So 26K instead of 18K. All right. So it's not dead until it's dead. And if you guys are ever in a scenario where you're like, I don't think we can let this one go yet, get a hold of your manager, get a hold of somebody who's got some experience, lay out the scenario, and let's see what we can do to bring that one back to life, right? Maybe we got to do a little bit of CPR on that placement. We'll figure it out. Okay. But it's just really important to remember that that's part of the reason you're all here is because we're problem solvers. We got to figure out how to overcome these obstacles.
Thank you both
Cool.
for that.
Oh, yeah.
And also, I know we're not talking client side right here, Tom, but always realize the value of the physicians we're working with, and the time the clients have put in. The clients themselves have put in a lot of time by this point of bringing somebody in, giving them an offer, getting emotionally invested in them joining their team. So again, use that emotion and the fact that this person is going to come in and solve two issues, a staffing issue, so they're going to be able to like save lives, but secondly, a revenue issue. And while you have the client on the hooks, exploit it as much as you can. If you're losing, like push as hard as you can at that point and see what can be turned around. Because lots of times clients will do more than they'll tell you that they'll do if they really want somebody to join their team.
Yep.
Oh, one last thing I just thought of. If let's say your doctor has interviewed and you get a call from the client or an email from the client with something along the lines of, did you Google search this physician? And then they send you a mugshot. It's probably dead. It's probably dead at that point. Okay. Mugshots are bad. Zing.
I may have
Okay.
experienced that one this year.
Yes. Yeah. Do this long enough and you're definitely going to see it. So that's why Google search every physician before you send their name every time, no matter what. On that note, anybody got anything here? Ready to wrap this thing up? Okay, awesome. Well, I really appreciate everybody's input and sharing some things here. Hopefully this was beneficial. And like I said, I'm planning on a Know Your Competition client edition here by the end of the year. So stay tuned.
Thanks,
See you guys.
Have a good day.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. See
Thanks, Ian.
everybody.
Great work.
Bye. Thank you.